you didn't meet that person by accident, and deep down, you already know that. You survived something that most people can't even explain. You loved someone who seemed to love you back, but slowly, quietly, they dismantled you. They took your confidence, your peace, your sense of reality, and when it was finally over, you were left standing in the wreckage of your own life, asking the only question that made sense. Why did this happen to me? Not why did they do it? You've probably figured that out by now. But why you? Why this? Why now? I need you to hear this. And I mean really hear it. What happened to you was not random. It was not punishment. And it was not because you were weak. Across ancient traditions, from Buddhist teachings to Sufi mysticism to the shamanic wisdom of indigenous peoples to modern spiritual psychology, there is one idea that appears again and again. Some people are sent to us, not to destroy us, but to initiate us. Today, we are going to go deep. We are going to explore 5 profound spiritual reasons why the narcissist may have been sent into your life, and what your soul was meant to learn from that encounter. This is not about excusing what they did. What they did was wrong. This is about you. This is about what you're carrying. And this is about who you are becoming on the other side of this. Stay with me. This might be the most important video you watch this year. Why the narcissist was sent to you. Reason 1. You are living someone else's life, and your soul called for a reset. Let me ask you something that might sting. Before the narcissist entered your life, were you truly living as yourself, or were you living by rules you never chose? Roles you never agreed to? A version of yourself that was built to keep other people comfortable? Here's what spiritual traditions across the world agree on. The soul does not tolerate inauthenticity forever. In Buddhist philosophy, this is called dukkha, the suffering that arises when we are out of alignment with our true nature. The Buddha taught that suffering is not the enemy. Suffering is the messenger. It arrives when something fundamental has gone wrong beneath the surface. The Sufi mystic Rumi wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." He wasn't being poetic for the sake of it. He understood that sometimes the only way the soul breaks through our armor, the armor we've built to please others, to stay safe, to belong, is through a wound so deep it cracks everything open. Now, here's the unexpected connection most people miss. The narcissist didn't create your wound. They found it. They targeted the crack that was already there. Narcissists, whether consciously or not, are extraordinarily skilled at identifying people who have suppressed their authentic self. People, pleasers, overgivers, highly empathic people who learned early in life that love is conditional, that they must earn their place, that their needs are secondary. Sound familiar? What if the narcissist was the spiritual equivalent of a demolition crew, sent not to build something new, but to tear down the structure that was never meant to last? Ancient shamanic traditions speak of the dark initiator, a figure who appears in someone's life specifically to force a death of the false self. In many indigenous cultures, this is not seen as a curse. It is seen as a calling. The Lakota Sioux speak of Heyoka, the sacred contrarian, the trickster figure who teaches by doing the opposite of what is expected. The heyoka causes disruption, discomfort, even pain. But their purpose is to jolt the community and the individual into a new level of awareness. Was your narcissist a heyoka? Someone whose dysfunction cracked open the life you were living, so you could finally build the one you were meant to live? Let me ask those deep questions. Before this person entered your life, whose version of yourself were you living? Were there parts of your authentic self you had buried? Your opinions, your boundaries, your desires, long before they arrived. If the relationship hadn't happened, how much longer would you have stayed in a life that wasn't truly yours? Here's the pinpoint takeaway from reason 1. Your soul cannot stay in misalignment forever. Something will arrive to force the shift. Narcissists target pre-existing wounds. They didn't create your pain. They revealed it. The destruction of a false life is the first step toward an authentic one. Spiritual traditions across cultures recognize the dark initiator as a sacred, necessary figure. The question isn't, why did this happen? It's, what false version of me needed to die? Reason 2. You had an unhealed wound from childhood, and the narcissist was the mirror. This one requires courage to hear. So I'm going to ask you to breathe for a moment before we go in. The narcissist in your adult life almost always rhymes with someone from your childhood. I don't say this to blame you. I say this because it is one of the most consistent findings across spiritual psychology, trauma therapy, and ancient wisdom traditions. And understanding it is the key to breaking the cycle forever. In Jungian psychology, the work of Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, there is a concept called repetition compulsion. Jung believed the unconscious mind is always trying to heal its wounds. And the way it does this is by recreating the original wounding situation, hoping this time for a different outcome. So your psyche, your deeper self, will unconsciously draw in a partner who feels familiar, not healthy familiar, wound familiar. The cold parent who withheld love, the critical authority figure who made you feel like you were never enough, the unstable caregiver whose moods you spent your childhood trying to manage. The narcissist felt like home, because trauma had taught you that this is what love feels like. What if the narcissist wasn't sent to wound you further, but to bring the original wound to the surface where it could finally be seen? Think about this. A wound that stays buried can never heal. It festers. It shapes every relationship you have without you ever knowing why. The great spiritual teacher Thomas More, in his landmark book, Care of the Soul, wrote that the soul seeks its own healing. But it does so through symptoms, through pain, through repetition, until we look. The Hindu concept of samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, operates on both a cosmic and a psychological level. We return to the same patterns, the same dynamics, the same pain, lifetime after lifetime, or relationship after relationship, until we awaken. Your relationship with the narcissist may have been the final chapter of a story that started in your childhood, not because you are cursed, but because your soul was finally ready to end the cycle. Let me share a personal experience that changed Sarah's perspective. Sarah is a 34-year-old teacher who came out of a 6-year relationship with a covert narcissist. She said, "When I finally went to therapy, my therapist showed me a list of traits I used to describe my ex. Unpredictable, hot and cold, charming in public but cold at home, made me feel like I was always doing something wrong. Then she showed me another list. It was my mother. I broke down. I had spent 30 years trying to earn love from someone who couldn't give it. First my mother, then him. The narcissist didn't create my wound. He made it impossible to ignore. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Gustav Jung. Here's the pinpoint takeaway from Reason 2. Repetition compulsion is not weakness. It is the unconscious mind trying to heal. The narcissist rhymes with your original wound because your psyche recognized the pattern. The relationship forced the childhood wound to the surface, where healing becomes possible. Samsara ends not through escape, but through awakening. You are awakening now. Identifying the original wound is the most powerful thing you can do after leaving a narcissist. Reason 3. You are being trained in soul-level discernment, a power narcissists accidentally gave you. Here's a perspective you may never have considered. What if the narcissist was your teacher, not of love, but of discernment? Discernment, the ability to see clearly, to distinguish the real from the false, the genuine from the performative, the safe from the dangerous. It is one of the rarest and most powerful gifts a human being can possess, and it almost never develops without being forged. The ancient Greek philosopher Socrates believed that wisdom begins not with knowledge, but with the recognition of deception. His most famous teaching, "Know thyself," was not a gentle suggestion. It was a battle cry. Because knowing yourself means you can no longer be fooled about what is real and what is not. Before the narcissist, you may have been what spiritual teachers call spiritually naive, deeply loving, deeply trusting, but without the discernment to protect that love. The Sufi tradition speaks of kashf, a sudden unveiling, a moment when the veil between illusion and reality is torn. For many narcissist survivors, the moment of seeing clearly what the narcissist truly was, that devastating moment of clarity, is a form of kashf. You were not destroyed by that moment. You were unveiled. What if the narcissist was sent specifically to train you in the skill of seeing through masks? Because here's what no one talks about. After surviving a narcissistic relationship, survivors develop an almost supernatural ability to detect inauthenticity. They can sense manipulation earlier. They recognize red flags instantly. They no longer ignore their gut. That is not damage. That is evolution. In shamanic traditions, there is a concept of, the wounded healer. The idea is that those who have been broken in specific ways develop a unique capacity to recognize and heal that same wound in others. Your experience with the narcissist may be preparing you to protect others, to lead others, to see what others cannot. Let yourself ask the deep questions. How is your ability to read people different now than it was before this relationship? Can you sense inauthenticity faster now? Do you trust your gut more? What would you warn someone today that you wish you had known before? I'd like to share a real-life experience. David, 41, a survivor of an 8-year marriage to a covert narcissist. People ask him, "How do you got through it?" He tell them, "I didn't just get through it. I came out the other side with a radar that doesn't lie. Now I work with at-risk youth. I can see pain underneath a tough exterior in seconds. I can see when a kid is being manipulated by their peers. The narcissist trained me. It cost me everything. But I would not trade what I can see now." Here's the pinpoint takeaway from reason 3. Discernment. True soul-level discernment is forged, not born. It requires a crucible. Your radar for manipulation and inauthenticity is now one of your greatest strengths. Socratic wisdom begins with recognizing deception. You have lived that lesson. The wounded healer archetype exists because suffering creates unique capacity for insight. The narcissist gave you the gift of seeing clearly, even though they never meant to. Reason 4. You are being called to reclaim your sovereignty, and only extreme loss could do it. Let me be direct with you. You gave yourself away. Not because you were stupid, not because you were weak, but because you were never taught that your inner world was worth protecting. Many narcissist victims grew up in environments, family systems, religious institutions, cultural frameworks, where self-sacrifice was glorified, where expressing needs was selfish, where keeping the peace was more important than telling the truth. And so you became extraordinarily skilled at abandoning yourself to maintain connection. The theological concept of imago Dei, found in Abrahamic traditions, teaches that every human being is made in the image of the divine. This means you, at your core, are sacred, inviolable, worthy of protection. But if you were never taught that, if no one ever reflected your sacred worth back to you, then you spent your life allowing yourself to be treated as less than you are. The narcissist took that tendency to its extreme. They didn't just ask you to abandon yourself occasionally. They demanded it as the price of their love. And somewhere in that extremity, something in you said no. What if the only way your soul could finally learn the lesson of sovereignty was through someone who violated it completely? Think about it this way. You can study fire from a textbook, or you can get burned. And know, in your cells, your nerves, your bones, what fire truly is. The Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron writes extensively about what she calls the wisdom of insecurity. She argues that it is precisely our moments of greatest destabilization, when everything we relied on is stripped away, that we discover what was always real and unshakable within us. The narcissist stripped away everything you leaned on externally, their approval, their validation, the relationship itself. And in that emptiness, you were finally forced to find something inside yourself that doesn't need external validation to exist. That is sovereignty, and you found it the hardest way possible, which means you will never lose it again. The ancient Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wrote those words as he navigated betrayal, loss, and the weight of an empire. He too was forged. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. Maybe it's time to ask the deeper questions. When did you first realize that your needs mattered? Not because someone told you, but because you felt it. What part of yourself did you reclaim after leaving that you didn't even know you had lost? If you had never experienced this, would you have ever learned what you truly will and will not accept? Here's the pinpoint takeaway from reason 4. Sovereignty. True unshakable self-authority cannot be taught abstractly. It must be earned. The narcissist's extreme demands finally activated your no, the no you may never have found otherwise. Pema Chodron's wisdom of insecurity. Losing everything external forces us inward to what is real. Imago Dei. You are inherently sacred. The narcissist violated that, and your soul responded. The lesson of sovereignty, learned this way, is permanent. You will never fully give yourself away again. Reason 5. You are being prepared for a larger purpose. One that requires this level of understanding. I want to save this one for last, because it is the most expansive. And it requires everything we've talked about so far. You were not just meant to survive this. You were meant to do something with it. I know how that sounds when you're still healing. I know it might even feel offensive. I didn't sign up for a mission. I just wanted to be loved. And that's real. That's valid. Stay there as long as you need. But when you're ready, and you may already be, consider this. There is a concept in Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, the foundational work of logotherapy, that states, meaning is not found despite suffering. It is found through it. Frankl survived the Nazi concentration camps and emerged with one of the most powerful psychological frameworks in history. Not because suffering is good, but because meaning transforms suffering into purpose. The Bodhisattva ideal in Mahayana Buddhism describes a being who delays their own full enlightenment, specifically so they can return and help others find their way. The Bodhisattva has walked through the darkest valleys. That is precisely what equips them to guide others. You have walked through the valley. You know what it's like in there. And there are people, right now, still lost inside it, who need someone who has been there. What if your experience with the narcissist was the specific kind of darkness that was required to give you the specific kind of light that the world needs from you? Not generic light, not theoretical compassion, but the precise, hard, one understanding that only comes from living through exactly what you lived through. The African philosophical concept of Ubuntu, I am because we are, teaches that individual healing and community healing are inseparable. Your healing does not end with you. It ripples outward, into your family, your friendships, your community, perhaps far beyond that. The greatest advocates for domestic abuse survivors are survivors. The most effective counselors for narcissistic abuse are people who have lived it. The most powerful voices calling for change in dysfunctional family systems are people who escaped them. Your wound is your credential. This came from a real experience. Renata, 47, narcissistic abuse survivor turned coach. She spent 3 years after her divorce, asking, God, why this happened to me? She was angry. She was ashamed. She felt like a failure. Then, she started sharing her story online, just to process it. Within weeks, hundreds of women were writing to me saying, this is my life. She realized the narcissist didn't ruin my purpose. He became the reason. She found it. What matters is not what happened to you, but what you do with what happened to you. Jean-Paul Sartre. Here's the pinpoint takeaway from reason 5. Viktor Frankl proved that meaning is not found despite suffering. It is constructed through it. The Bodhisattva walks through darkness specifically so they can guide others through it. Your experience gave you precision-level understanding that generic compassion cannot replicate. Ubuntu. Your healing ripples outward. It was never only about you. Your wound is your credential. Your story is someone else's survival guide. So let's bring this together. Why was the narcissist sent to you? Not as punishment, not as proof that you are broken, not as evidence that love is impossible, but as a spiritual contract, one your deeper self agreed to before your conscious mind knew what was coming. They were sent to demolish the false life you were living. They were sent to surface the childhood wound that needed healing. They were sent to forge your discernment, your ability to see clearly. They were sent to awaken your sovereignty, your unshakable sense of self. And they were sent to prepare you for a purpose that requires exactly the kind of strength you have now. You are not a victim of a random act of cruelty. You are someone who walked through fire and is now deciding what to do with the light. The contract is complete. The initiator has done their work. What you do next, that is yours. I want to hear from you, not about what they did, but about you. In the comments below, I want you to finish this sentence. The one thing I reclaimed after leaving the narcissist was, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be poetic. It can be as simple as my mornings or my laughter or my voice. Write it. Because someone out there is going to read your answer. And it's going to give them permission to start reclaiming too. Your words matter more than you know. If something in this video met you somewhere you've been trying to put into words, there's more here. I make videos for people who are doing the deep work, not the quick fixes, not the toxic positivity, the real work. If that resonates, you know where the button is. No pressure. Just know this channel was built for exactly where you are right now.